We'll move on to our 6.8, consideration of a presentation by Sonoma Clean Power, and B, consideration of direction to staff to request Sonoma Clean Power undertake an updated study on the feasibility of Lake County joining the Community Choice Aggregator. And we have Matthew Rothstein and Benjamin Rickelman here, along with, I'll let you introduce yourself, sir. Sorry.
Good morning, Supervisors. Matthew Rothstein, Chief Deputy County Administrative Officer. As you may be aware, in 2015, the county adopted Ordinance Number 3026, authorizing implementation of Community Choice Aggregation, or CCA, in Lake County. And in the time since, joining a Community Choice Aggregator has been periodically explored. In 2019 and 2020, at the county's request, Sonoma Clean Power conducted a feasibility study and found their expected rates at that time would have been about 5 to 8% higher than PG&E for Lake County residents. As a result, you can appreciate no offer of service was extended, but Sonoma Clean Power's board did commit to monitoring California Public Utilities Commission rulings and market conditions for potential opportunities to extend service to Lake County. Recent changes, including shift of responsibility for the Diablo Canyon nuclear facilities costs from PG&E's portfolio to all three California investor-owned utilities, have created an environment wherein Lake County's power charge indifference adjustment, which is an exit fee to make sure that remaining investor-owned utilities customers are not unduly burdened, would be very probably substantially lower than in 2020. While Sonoma Clean Power cannot promise cost savings, overall rates may therefore be lower for Lake County residents in the near to medium term. Therefore, this item invites your board to consider direction to staff to request that Sonoma Clean Power update their feasibility study. And for your awareness, the cities of Lakeport and Clear Lake have both already communicated their interest in an updated study. You will be aware that Sonoma Clean Power has a suite of consumer-facing programs, customer-facing programs, and they are likewise leading efforts to expand development of enhanced geothermal systems in Sonoma and Mendocino counties to meet statewide renewable energy goals. Later in this presentation, our economic development-focused Deputy County Administrative Officer, Ben Rickelman, will speak to geothermal-related considerations. And next, I'd like to introduce Jeff Cyphers, Chief Executive Officer from Sonoma Clean Power.
Good morning, Chair and Supervisors. Thank you for inviting me here. And I'm joined by a couple team members here, Miles and Ryan. If there's anything really technical, I can ask them, phone a friend. I'm here to talk about those twin ideas. So local power production and the expansion of geothermal, and also of some of the benefits that service from Sonoma Clean Power could extend into Lake County if this board was interested. And I wanted to bring up that you already have really good partnerships, I know, with Calpine and NCPA for geothermal. And so this is an additive process to that, potentially, if the board's interested. And some of the benefits that I think we could help bring are allowing the residents and businesses of Lake County to actually use the power that's produced here. That's something that's currently not really available to you. And also really helping steer California's development of new geothermal in ways that benefits your community and not just at the whim of regulators and state agencies. And the third thing is really adding to the services that PG&E provides. So I'll talk a little bit about our agency, but one of the things I'm really proud of is we have good customer service and we offer good incentives. And sometimes that even means getting PG&E on the phone with us to help explain how PG&E works. So let me back up and go to the first slide, please. Do I control it? Just hit arrow. Okay, thanks. So I want to just mention briefly what community choice is. And so community choice, or sometimes CCA for community choice aggregation, is really about having local agencies, so cities and counties, come together and buy the power that their customers need, and in terms of generation, and then effectively rent the power lines from PG&E to deliver it to customers. And so PG&E remains absolutely critical in this process. They still own all the poles, all the wires, all the substations. This is really just the power sources. And so It really came about, if any of you remember the Enron crisis and the energy crisis and Gray Davis losing his job and all of that, the lights going out. In 2000, there was a really serious crisis that cost our state upwards of $60 billion. And because of the market manipulation that was happening at the time, there was an interest in having more public oversight of power markets. And so the legislation was passed way back then, and it took some time to really get started. But the map of California there shows the green areas have active service or near-term planned service for CCAs in California. Again, public agencies, not-for-profit, owned by our customers. So the idea behind this is really to bring some benefits back to the community as best we can. We've been operating our CCA since 2014 and expanded to Mendocino in 2017. And as Matthew mentioned, took a look at Lake County a while back. Things do look better now, so I want to get into that. So let's see. So Sonoma Clean Power has been serving for a little over 10 years. We have a board of directors that consists of the cities and the 2 county representatives from the supervisors that we serve in Sonoma and Mendocino. And what's very unusual about CCAs is that our customers can leave. And that is very unusual for a public agency. It means we have to compete to keep our customers. So we have successfully managed to serve 87% of all the homes and businesses in our territory, so we have a good track record. But 13% of the folks decided they wanted their service from PG&E alone. And so that option keeps us on our toes, and it means that we don't always act like a typical water or municipal power agency. We have to be out in public way more often to keep customer interest. Our power sources today are our basic default service called Clean Start. It's hydro, wind, geothermal from this region. The next biggest one is called CAISO System Power, which is mostly natural gas. And then we also have some biomass and some solar and a little tiny bit of nuclear power. The optional service is called Evergreen, and that is a premium service that is mostly geothermal and solar, and it's all produced inside our service territory. So today it's all energy that is made in Mendocino and Sonoma County. And that premium costs an average household between $15 and $30 a month extra cost. So this is for people who have the money to support that kind of effort. And it is a pretty small fraction of our population, but it's a very proud group. They're out there in front all the time. The kinds of community support that we add to PG&E, so again, like if service from a CCA were in Lake County, you would still have access to all of PG&E's programs. But what we would want to do is add to that. And so these are examples. We have facilities and call centers that help customers with high power bills. That is the most popular thing we do, is do counseling on, how do you trim your power bill? I was impressed by the item you just had about trimming your power bill, so congrats to your team on that. We also are responsive to conditions that come about. So in 2015, we made a small donation after the Valley Fire here in Lake County. And admittedly, it was only $5,000. We'd only been serving for 12 months and didn't have any money yet. But in 2018, following our Tubbs fire, just a few years later, we were able to raise $1 million for relief efforts and be out in the communities quite a bit. We also got PG&E and the local air board to kick in $15 million to help folks rebuild their homes following the fires. One of the most important parts of that was actually providing one-on-one support to people who'd lost their homes and helping them walk through their insurance claims and how to design and rebuild and work with contractors and all those basic things. A lot of school programs, our workforce development effort is a really core piece of who we are. And so we work with both unions, with junior colleges, with trade schools, and really try to build, starting in elementary school all the way through, to have in-classroom programs as well. So the history of our competitiveness on price is a good one, but it is not perfect. And so I want to be really candid that when we talk about cost savings with Sonoma Clean Power, It's that disclaimer in the upper right, I'm glad it's not obscured, is that we cannot promise cost savings. Our history, if you look at all the months of our service, is we've been cheaper 80% of the time, a little more than 80%. And I'm proud of that track record. But the things that make it impossible to promise that forever is PG&E can do things that affect the fees on our customers that we don't control. Regulators can change regulations and drive up costs, and the energy market itself can fluctuate. And so we absolutely are here to try to save money, and we very often do. And so we've certainly saved customers historically in total much over $100 million so far collectively. So we're really proud of that. But that disclaimer is an important one. So any consideration of service from us would have to understand that that this track record is what it is, and we're going to keep making efforts to be as strong as we can. In the last year and currently, we have the best savings we've ever had. So 7% doesn't sound like a lot, but in order to have 7% savings on the total electric bill, we have to give $50 million back to our customers in 1 year just to produce 7% savings. That's how much money is involved in energy. So it's a very it's hard to squeeze $50 million out of the system, but we've been able to do it last year, and I think we'll be able to continue doing it through this year. It's hard to make forecasts much more than a year in advance, so I want to make sure that's understood. This slide is just in here to show you that we're doing everything we can to not make the bills more complicated. The bills are way too complicated as they are. The two highlighted lines in the middle there show that we partner with PG&E to have one bill. Nobody wants to pay for delivery costs separate from generation costs. They want to pay one bill for power. And so what we show is that PG&E is charging for delivery and Sonoma Clean Power is charging for generation. And then our call center can walk people through how on the following 2 pages, you can see how much money you saved by being with Sonoma Clean Power as well. So people can understand the value proposition of that. Just quick highlight a couple of these. So when we talk about our incentives and offers for customers, sometimes we use the term programs. What we're really trying to do is help customers navigate high bills and also get access to technology that they might not be able to afford. We're currently rolling out a thermostat program where we install thermostats in low-income households for free. And that helps customers shift when their air conditioner is running in particular, so that they're using less electricity during the peak time period. So they're saving money by doing that. We also have a savings box that we can send out to customers on request or check out from a library. And in it, you can take out and use and keep the light bulbs, the weather stripping. There's a manual on how to lower your energy costs. There's a smart plug, things like that. There's a lot more to this, but we can get into it as there's interest. And then I think what's really exciting to me is that several years ago, our team, and I want to thank Ryan Tracy in particular, really put our finger on the fact that the technology of geothermal is going through a new renaissance worldwide. The ability now to build geothermal affordably in today's market is expanding really rapidly. And a lot of that know-how came out of oil and gas. How do you drill a well affordably? That's what the oil and gas industry figured out. And so as a result, California has already ordered 2,000 megawatts. So I think what's on the hill today, 750 megawatts or so of production right now between NCPA and Calpine. So this would about triple that amount, and that's already under an order from the state. What we really want to do is help steer that to go in the places we want it to be, and in with the right kind of community engagement that is needed to get it right, to make sure it's low water. We don't have a whole lot more water, and to make sure that we're attending to all the things that could go wrong, but don't need to, like handling seismic safety and air quality and all the rest. If you haven't heard about it, I want to talk about one of the technologies, but maybe right before I do, the partnership that we've formed is currently between the counties of Sonoma and Mendocino and Sonoma Clean Power. And that is the structure we currently have to do that kind of steering work for new geothermal in the region. And we've targeted 600 megawatts for Sonoma and Mendocino County across those two counties over the next 1 to 2 decades of development. And we've been working in our communities to educate the community about why that is valuable. For anybody who hasn't thought about kind of the state's climate goals, one of the problems with them is that we haven't been building the resources that actually allow those goals to be finished. We've done the first set of technologies, solar and wind and batteries. We've done a lot of that. You can't ever really shut down a nuclear plant or a gas plant until you have a resource that runs at winter and through the night. And geothermal is one of those key resources. So we have this opportunity zone we've set up, and this is really to be more attractive for grant funding. And this is something where it's one of the few things that I think Trump and Biden agreed on, which is geothermal is a good technology. And so I'm actually excited about working with this administration. The industry partners that we work with, we are working with their know-how about how to drill and operate. And we're working with them to steer those projects to the right kinds of places near power lines and with the least amount of impacts. So if we wanted to work together and the board wanted us to study the feasibility of expanding service to Lake County, I just wanted to offer up this timeline. This is really kind of roughly the earliest service that we could provide, and it's driven by state rules. And so the early summer of 2027 is about what we're talking about, to give us time to have a conversation. Nobody should rush this. We don't want to rush it, but we need to understand what the feasibility is, what the costs are, what the value is. If the feasibility study is requested and we go back and do that and bring it back with the results, that would be a time to have a really detailed conversation about what are the risks, what are the benefits, all of that in detail. Today is really just a snapshot, I think. And in order to hit a service date in 2027, we'd need to file an official plan with the California Public Utilities Commission by the very beginning, January 1 of 2026. So that's our deadline for that work. And I think I'll do this one and then turn it over to Ben. Okay. So briefly, what's one of the exciting evolutions in newer geothermal technology is that we no longer have to be in an area with exactly the conditions of the geysers facility today. So what the geysers has is sort of magical. It has volcanic rock that's fractured and has pathways for water to move through. It has historic water underground. It has a recharge facility, and it has hot rock near the surface. So it has all those conditions that make it this sort of magical place. What we're finding with EGS is the ability to drill 2 vertical wells, one that injects and one that collects, and then underground to crack the rock between those 2 wells and create the fracture network. So we're looking for really dry, hot rock without the water, without the fractures. And it allows us to keep the water in the system. So it actually allows us to recirculate the water over and over again. And that is very exciting because everyone's told us we don't have a lot of spare water. So EGS is getting proven up right now in Utah, and there's a facility that's getting up and operating there that's substantial. It's 400 megawatts. And what drives me nuts is they're selling all of that Utah energy to California, to Southern California, and Utah's not benefiting from the energy, but they're definitely benefiting from the dollars and the jobs and the taxes. And one of the things that's keeping us from doing that here is California's permitting process. It basically requires us to go through the CEQA review twice for geothermal, once to explore and then once to develop. And so we do have a bill in Sacramento this year to try to change it to look more like the rest of the nation, so that so that we streamline the exploration phase and make sure that process is efficient and quick, so that the developers will want to come back to California. Right now, they're mostly looking at Nevada, Colorado, and Utah. They're not really interested in California today. So we got to change that. And I will turn it over to Ben. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Jeff. Excellent. I could,
Do you,
Or I can move
Oh,
this
okay.
over to you. Or reach it.
appreciate it. Oh, okay. Yeah, let me just move. Let's go back. There we go. Just going one direction now.
There's the little things on the left bottom. There's little arrows down there. You can there. You can go
Oh,
the way
okay.
you want.
I'm good now, but
Okay.
thank you. Ben Rickelman, Deputy County Administrative Officer. So I was going to build on what Jeff is saying about the commercialization of new geothermal technologies and then the potential economic development benefit for Lake County. This is the Utah project Jeff was mentioning. This is Cape Station in western Utah by Fervo Energy. They just announced today it's actually 500 megawatts. They have a permit up to 2 gigawatts. So for each of those pads, there's multiple wells. So a lot of the activity is below the surface. They're drilling about 8,000 feet down vertically. And Fervo is a really interesting story and kind of a proof of concept. It's the first, I would say, broad scale new generation geothermal project in the United States. They've raised about 800 million, about 600 million in the last year. So there's been a lot of work with the federal government and several geothermal companies to commercialize the technology, and we're just getting at the point now where it's at major scale. And as Jeff mentioned, they have a 320 megawatt PPA agreement with Southern California Edison. So this is a picture that just came out. This is also Fervo's Cape Station project. This is kind of the central hub. So work on the turbines and then the processing. This is in Bavaria, Germany. So this is one of the two companies. Sonoma Clean Power has a cooperative agreement with the Geozone. So this company is known as Ever. They're a Canadian company. They're using a different geothermal technology. It's called a closed loop. So they drill down around 18,000 square feet, and it's a series of connected loops. It generates both electric and thermal energy. I guess the question of commercialization with this is it's substantially funded through European Union grant funding and some state-backed loans. So I think it's kind of wait and see if it can reach the commercial potential. This is from a report from the Department of Energy, and I put this in the presentation just to kind of show where we are in the process of iterative improvement. So there's a lot of tech transfer from the oil and gas industry, but in generally, these new geothermal technologies, you're drilling farther down, so it's harder rock, higher temperature, higher pressure. So the industry's had to make these process improvements, these technology improvements, and now we're kind of getting to the point, and Fervo's the industry leader, of harnessing these technologies and process improvements for large production. So Jeff touched on this, and I was just going to go into a little more detail. So industry term for geothermal is firm power. It's 24/7, unlike solar and wind. And so when utility is putting together a generation portfolio, they have to think how to balance the intermittent power of solar or wind. And so geothermal being carbon free, but also being 24/7, it has a market premium. There's been purchase price agreements where it's been $20 to $30 more per megawatt than solar. So it's a key piece of the puzzle. The first graph is just demonstrating with the different utility regions. With solar and wind, there's only so much replacement rate with natural gas because it isn't firm power. And then the second one is showing energy demand in the country was fairly flat for a while, and then around the last 10 to 15 years, it's taken off again. A lot of that's driven by data centers, AI, but also just the overall electrification of the economy. So there's demand out there, and there's also a need for firm carbon-free power. So geothermal, even though the upfront cost might be more than solar and wind and long-duration batteries, it is could be a key component. This is another factor when thinking through Lake County. So we do have certain challenges Jeff was talking about with the permitting structure here in California. But one thing on the positive to take into consideration is it's currently very difficult to build transmission in the country, which basically these two graphs demonstrate, in transmission development is basically not quite halted, but very slow. So there is existing transmission capacity at the geysers. Roughly less than half is being used at the moment. So if there was further geothermal development, there would be that where the power, that wouldn't be a key roadblock. That's also important to take in consideration with, there's considerable geothermal development in Nevada and Utah, and there's some transmission capacity to get that to California, which is how that purchase agreement happened with Southern California Edison, but that transmission capacity is rather limited. So Jeff was talking about at the state level with permitting, there's also federal permitting, which is quite extensive. It has to go through NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act. Currently, it takes about 7 years for a geothermal project. As mentioned, there is bipartisan support. This is one of the few energy sources where there is at the moment. So there could be a change of the structure that would reduce the time frame to 4 to 7 years. And I think this is just important to keep in mind with any potential substantial geothermal development in Lake County. It would take a while. There would be potential exploratory activities and drilling shorter in that time frame, but for full-scale development and connection to the grid, with just taking into consideration the federal permitting process, that could be 7 years. And then through an economic development lens, I think there's a few different factors to consider. One is it's a very CapEx intensive industry. There's a lot of capital expenditure, which would be fairly unique for Lake County and just in general in rural areas. Fervo was estimating to just drill one well. It takes about $4 million, and one well, they're getting about 10 megawatts. So they're drilling lots and lots of wells, several under each pad. But it's a lot of steel. It's a lot of high-end machinery. And then also with that, which we do see with the geysers too, there's a fair amount of sales tax just with replacement. So with all these different parts and operating under high pressure, there's a substantial recurring revenue for the tax base. Somewhat unique with geothermal, and it's also true with oil and gas, is both the temporary and permanent jobs are high wages. It's almost all in the six figures. You need specialized drilling experience to work on these. And then there's substantially more construction drilling positions than permanent, but they all pay well. That's all we have for our presentation, but open for questions and comments.
Supervisor Pyska?
Yeah, Jeff and Miles and Ryan, thanks for coming today. You know, I think we are all aware that our constituents are being crushed right now with their utility bills, so I'm happy that we're having this conversation. We owe it to our constituents to have this conversation and to look for pathways that can reduce that burden that they're feeling, especially our small businesses. We had several just absolutely fold during the summer last year, and their utility bills were the main cause. So I think, you know, it would be, we need to look for other alternatives. What is the process if we gave direction today? What does that look like for the feasibility analysis, going to your board, and then coming back to us?
I'll share through staff the stepwise process so you can have that in writing. But generally speaking, we would go back after receiving a request for feasibility. We would go back and take probably 2 to 3 months, probably closer to 3, to study and really analyze the numbers and develop an opinion, and bring that to our board to get confirmation that they're interested and that they would like to extend an offer. And that can take at least 1 cycle of board meetings, maybe 2. And then this board would, in parallel, would be getting a briefing on the results and considering whether or not you want to explore this. And ultimately, there would be an ordinance that would be passed if that's the right way to go and joining is the right thing. And once that ordinance is signed, then we go through the process of updating our regulatory documents. So it's called an implementation plan, and file that with the PUC. That's what triggers a 1-year minimum clock for us to go out and buy resources for these new customers. And we have to do that in advance. And so that's why we're looking at more like May of 2017 for service. So that's the rough calendar. It could take longer if this body or our board needed longer, or if we, for whatever reason, needed more time. It's a little harder to squeeze that into a shorter timeline because of the regulatory delay process.
Okay. And then contingencies. So would both the cities need to also join to make this feasible?
Yes. Well, not to make it feasible. So I failed to mention, I apologize, that the cities of Clear Lake and Lakeport did request feasibility analysis. So
Okay.
that those letters have already been received, and we have begun that work. This can work with just one jurisdiction out of those 3 coming in. It makes more sense. It's much simpler to communicate with the public if all 3 came together or didn't come together, because it can lead to a lot of confusion if Lakeport's in but Clear Lake's out and so forth. So if it all lines, my hope is that it's all yes or all no, because it does mean we can go out and get on the radio and get in the local papers and have community events and nobody will be confused. So that's my hope, but that's just staff's hope. That's
Okay,
not a
so
political answer.
Okay. And then is there any financial benefit for all 3 jurisdictions joining?
The scale helps, and so so the cost of feasibility to Lake County is nothing. We do that on our dime. If Lake County ultimately joins, then what we have the option to do is delay providing cash incentives to customers for like an optional program for some period of time to recoup the cost of that study. In the past, our board waived that for Mendocino, so you could request waiving that as well. It's not a big number. So from that standpoint, that's a no cost risk to the county. the advantage of some scale is there, and really the efficiency of rolling out at one time is the big deal, because we'll be sending folks from our team up here to work with you all and your constituents, and being able to hold 40 events that reach everyone, as opposed to 40 events one year and 40 events the next year, and so forth. So it's more about efficiency of the process. It's not a big dollar. It won't change rates.
Okay.
So that's maybe the bottom line answer.
Okay. And then, Ben, you talked a little bit about the benefits of geothermal in our community. I've always been in favor of expanding geothermal capacity in our county. Is this going to be contingent on the geozones?
No, these decisions can be made independently. I think it's logical to me that Lake County, being in the geozone, for example, would have, and we've heard in our previous conversations, would have some connection to being able to use the power that's being produced. And so if you agree with that, the simplest way that I see is to have service from Sonoma Clean Power. But these are two separate decisions that can be made independently. And so having service from Sonoma Clean Power doesn't require you to be in the geozone. You have a lot of potential here, I think, for new geothermal and the transmission that was mentioned. And so I think from an economic development standpoint, that would be pretty valuable. But again, that can be made independently.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I was just going to quickly add with the county and the geozone. So the county would, if it was to join the geozone, it wouldn't be giving up any regulatory power. You can think of the geozone as community engagement and business development. Any geothermal project would still go through community development and the permitting process here. And then, so the geothermal setback around Clear Lake, which prohibits geothermal development in that area, would still be in place, and that this wouldn't alter that in any manner.
Supervisor Owen?
Well, I'm pretty excited about this, to be honest. I think that the competition is healthy. I think it's always healthy. I had spoke with Miles and Ryan about possibly, you guys are looking to drill and put in your some new stations, and I had requested and asked if you would be willing to drill in Lake County and to put some of your stations in this area for our tax benefits, so that we have more revenue. And I know at this moment, by far the biggest percentage of the people that work at the geysers do reside here in Lake County. By far, I think in NZPA, something like 40 employees and only 39 of them live in Lake County. And I can't remember, it's really high in the Calpine as well. So I think the new jobs that you'll be bringing will be huge. The subcontractors that also work up there, that'll help with that as well. So this is pretty exciting. I think I'm looking for maybe building in this area.
We're very open to it and absolutely want to take your lead. So we don't want to be the outsiders who come in and tell you what to do. So with that interest, I would love to expand on that.
Vice Chair, and then Supervisor.
I just want to, clarify. So if we did eventually join, our board would end up getting a seat on that board, and then most likely the two cities here would switch back and forth on a second seat, or?
That's what happened in Mendocino County, and that would be my expectation of where my board would likely extend an offer if all three entities came in. Yes.
Okay. Well, most of the rest of my questions have already been asked and answered. I'm definitely in favor of doing a study to find out if it's beneficial for our customers here in Lake County.
Supervisor Sabatier and then Supervisor Owen, you can go again after.
Yeah, appreciate the presentation. Obviously, you wouldn't be here if you didn't think the feasibility study would prove positive for you. So I think that's going to be an easy action to take. And I want to know what it says specifically. The devil's always in the details. Just two separate parts. One is the expansion of SCP being available to PG&E customers here. What kind of job creation would that create in Lake County for you mentioned you have great customer service. What would be the opportunities here to have people in Lake County available? You said something about visiting your home and providing boxes of ways to reduce your energy bill, things like that. What would that look like?
Yeah, we would need to invent that. But what I'm imagining would be most effective would be to have probably 1 or 2 full-time folks who are here in this region who are available to help with all the basic kind of questions that customers have and help out in those ways. And then for the more complicated situations where businesses have refrigeration units that are on the fritz or things like that, we have a team of engineers and folks back in our Santa Rosa office who can be dispatched or who can answer a lot of questions by phone. And the boxes you mentioned actually get mailed out. It's kind of a DIY kit. When it comes to homes, it is actually very difficult to staff going from home to home and make it count. We've tried that in the past, and it's extremely expensive. And so what we try to do is come up with better and better ways to teach people how to do something themselves or provide a cash incentive of hiring a contractor to help them out. So those are kind of the 2 channels we usually have for homes. And so the biggest jobs benefit is from energy production. It's not from customer service is going to be a pretty small opportunity for job generation here. The biggest one is going to be, I just was hearing about solar and batteries and EV charging stations. The geothermal would be the big game, but short of that, other forms of energy production, like building more solar and batteries that we could purchase so that on your owned land, so the county owns some land. We may want to set up a contract where we're paying you for production of power on your land. And then that can feed back into serving your own customers, but all of your customers as opposed to just the county. So that's a way of creating revenue from your owned assets as well.
And so you mentioned that you'd have that year to kind of increase your capacity for increased customers in Lake County. Would you be specifically looking into Lake County as far as where that would be generated, or would you be looking everywhere throughout your district and your region?
Everywhere in the 3 counties, if Lake County is in, we'd still be looking in Sonoma and Mendocino. We're not going to walk away from that, but we absolutely would be looking in Lake County too. And that's where this body has a lot of value to us if we're doing energy projects here. In advising us, what we always do if we're looking in a region, if we're looking in Mendocino and we're looking east of Ukiah, I know the supervisor I'm going to call and say, what do you think, before we ever spend a dime? Like, is that viable? Is it going to work? Do you know the landowner? All that kind of stuff. Same kind of process would happen here in Lake County, where we'd have a conference first with the people who represent that district, and then kind of build outward from there to prove the viability. And that's something we're doing all the time. We're currently finishing a project up in Mendocino County. It's a 4 megawatt solar array with some batteries. That's the biggest one we've done in Mendocino that's solar, but we're always looking for more opportunities. And so that's an ongoing project.
Okay. And my last comment is about the geothermal. I'm open to possibilities, but I'm also cautious to some of those possibilities. What I see is, yes, they do offer good jobs, but no, they have not changed the complete profile of Lake County and the struggles that we have in our financial status. What I see is raw resources leaving the county to be utilized by others. I want to make sure we benefit from the generation of electricity here. I want to because the end product of the, what's the term I'm looking for? The uplifting of the next product that's made, the manufacturing, the end results of the economy are much different in impacting our community and the economic development than the raw resource that is created from just going into the ground and creating things. So I'm hoping that we look not just at the generation of electricity, but how that's going to benefit the industries we have here currently, the residences that we have here currently, what kind of deals we can look at, and those are all for much later situations. But I want to make sure that if we're going to, I mean, we saw the pictures, there is nothing surrounding any of these facilities that are being built in Germany or Utah, right? Because you don't build communities around those types of facilities. You create something and then you sell it away from where it's created. I want to make sure it impacts us in a very positive way so we can build a different economy than what we have currently to really uplift our communities out of the unfortunate poverty that we're still surrounded by in Lake County. So hopefully those are things that we'll keep an eye on as we look at that. Obviously the impact to our environment as well. But it is a much cleaner generation of electricity than some of the past things that we've seen, and I'm interested in seeing what the possibilities are. So thank you for being here, and yes, for the feasibility study.
Supervisor Owen, you had your pen up?
Yes, I did. I have one more question now. As I understood it, when this was presented at Calpine, it will go into the ground, it'll be kind of a closed system, circulate through, get heated up by the core, come back up, and is there any loss of water during that process?
There can be. And so it is not a perfect closed loop, but it is substantially lower water use than the traditional technology that we built
That we're
out in the
using
50s
now,
and
yes.
60s. And I got to give Calpine huge credit for getting more out of what they already have. So they've been doing just stellar work up there. So what's new about this is it can go in places that are away from that region. So that's one key thing. And so we can look at different types of land that's maybe more impacted land or maybe closer to transmission or other kind of features. And it also has that ability to recirculate substantially most of the water as opposed to a smaller fraction. And so the amount of recharge it would need is going to depend on the specific rock, and we won't know that in advance, at least far in advance. But we can learn a lot during the exploration phase, and we'll know much more then about what the risks are of needing more water in that.
The Utah, what is their water lossage?
You have that?
Fervo's recapture rate for the water is about 85 to 90%.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you.
Right, thank you. A lot of the questions I had, thank you for your statement as well, Supervisor Sabatier, about what the return on investment basically is. That's one of the biggest things. I know that we had talked before, I think Jeff over in Clear Lake Oaks with some folks at the Nylander office. And Ben, thank you for mentioning the geothermal setbacks, because that's very important to me. I noticed in discussing this, and not only before, but like in some articles, there was statements made about how Lake County has like 3/4 of the land area. Just want to make sure that's not including the geothermal, setbacks. That's very important. Also, just another quick question. The board, it's comprised of members from which counties? And I know that it's said, but I just want to get them all.
So there's one supervisor, John Hashik from Mendocino, and one supervisor, Linda Hopkins from Sonoma. And then each of the cities have a representative on the board. In Mendocino, the 3 small cities actually share a board seat, and so they rotate that. Mm-hmm. And in Sonoma, where we started, all the cities have a seat. And so so it's an 11-member board today.
So Sonoma has how many seats total?
9.
Okay, and then we
All
would
told.
be sharing, if this potentially goes into an agreement or whatever the case may be, we would have 1 seat as a county and then a shared seat as Lakeport and Clear Lake.
That's my understanding of where it would likely land. The thing that Van Ruckelman mentioned that's important is you wouldn't be giving up any of your current jurisdiction by serving in a minority on the board. What your minority numbers relative to Sonoma would impact is new policies that agency's making or new direction it's making, but you wouldn't be surrendering any Lake County sovereignty or rights to control the permitting process for anything that goes on here. So I want to be clear about that. That the law doesn't even allow that. So so that's. I hope that helps.
That does. Supervisor Sabatier, you had your pen up.
And that actually leads me to something I forgot to ask about, and you just mentioned sovereignty. You're talking to the cities, you're talking to the county, but everybody on tribal is also accessing electricity on tribal land. What's that interaction look like, and are you interacting with the tribal councils in order to get support for this or not? Or what's that look like?
We are, and really, we're beginning even further back with most of the tribal engagement that we've had over the last year, because some of the tribes need more urgent help with some existing problem, like one group had quote-unquote free solar installed on all the homes, and no one explained how the true-up worked on their solar bill, and so they were going through the year thinking they were spending $20 a month, and everyone got air conditioning, and then they got $3,000 true-ups at the end of the year. We're helping tribes unwind those kind of situations and try to figure out how to fix them and get value out of what they already have. And so we bring up the geozone, we talk about it, but so far in our first year of really serious engagement, we've found we need to really focus on the immediate needs first, and then build from there. So we have made a long-term commitment, and in Sonoma and Mendocino counties, we've completed our first round of processes with 4 of the tribal groups, including the Round Valley multiple tribes. But we're in it for the long run. So if you've got advice on that, knowing Lake County has tribes as well, we're all ears.
And just to clarify, this SCP access in the electricity you're already receiving, where again, you showed us a bill where you get both of those, you need approval from the county and the cities to come in and provide that. My question is, where does tribal fit into that request? Is it completely separate? We can't come together all in one letter together saying, here's everybody that supports doing this?
So you're asking a really important question that California and the federal government have not given us a legal answer to that. And I think because California and the tribes are co-equals, it points me to the federal government to try and figure out how to answer that question. We've asked it, and I have not gotten an answer yet of how that sovereignty must be respected in the decision making. So what we're doing, because we don't have a legal answer, and because apparently no other CCA in the United States has gotten an answer, is we're just conferring with the tribes instead, just trying to explain how things are working and see if they have concerns. So we're using the consult process instead of a legal decision because I don't know how to make one yet.
But they would still have access to the service?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just one additional thought on that. Sonoma Clean Power has recently stood up a capital projects group, and so there might be potential partnerships with some of the Lake County tribes. I know a few of them are pursuing microgrids, so that could be something to explore.
All right, we'll open it up to the public if there's anyone that would like to make a comment.
Members of the board, my name is Denise Rushing. I am a citizen of Upper Lake, and I served on the Board of Supervisors for 8 years, ending in 2015, just before the first CCA item was brought to the board. My background prior to that was in the energy industry, so after I left the board, I also rejoined the energy industry. Before I retired, I ran the California Clean Energy Fund for a time. And I want to say 2 things. First, the community choice aggregation structure, these entities have proven themselves over this last decade. And when the board took this up last time and passed the ordinance that we would consider it, I think it was Supervisor Farrington had brought a proposal to the board, and it was run by a private entity. It was the only proposal of its kind in the state. I actually got up and spoke against it at the time because I didn't feel it had been proven, and it looked like it had a lot of risk to Lake County. I want to say that this community choice aggregation proposal, I mean, it's a no-brainer to get the feasibility study. Once you have the feasibility study, assuming that it shows that it's feasible, I would say that there are many things going for CCAs that have emerged over that period of time. One of them, of course, is that it's less expensive. PG&E at the time, a decade ago, put in some exit fees that made the feasibility study, where there was a window where it worked. They put those fees in and it didn't work to join, so that it was really hard for CCAs to add new customers. Now we have that window open again, at least for a time, and once you're in, you're in. So it's, I think it's an opportunity. Second is that when I was in the California Clean Energy Fund, looking at innovation across the state of California, and actually around the world, I worked for a company called New Energy Nexus, a nonprofit that fosters clean energy worldwide. Some of the greatest innovations in the state of California are coming from these community choice aggregators. Their innovations in customer service, their innovations in customer programs. They are leading how to get clean energy to the underserved and those who cannot afford it. They're leading in some of the key electrification efforts that need to happen. And there are some benefits, I think, to Sonoma Clean Power. Obviously, one of them might be support for the geozones, but also I don't think most people know that Lake County sits, because we sit between the Central Valley and the coast, we're either in one or the other solar zone when it comes to climate zones for analysis. And if you analyze solar for Lake County alone, the projects are almost always better than the analysis will show, because we have clearer skies usually, unless there's a fire year. We have clearer skies, we have better solar radiation, we have lower temperatures, which actually help the panels a bit. So we're in a great position to see some energy development here that's not just geothermal. The tribes may take advantage of that, the microgrids and some of the clean energy, but I think that most of those solar projects will look better than the analysis will show. So I think there's some benefits to having generation. And finally, I just want to say, wouldn't it be great to have Lake County residents benefit from the energy that's generated here? At one point in the past, I calculated that we were a net energy generator. We generate more energy in Lake County than our citizens use, and wouldn't it be nice if we could benefit from that? So I stand in support of you approving the feasibility study, and of course there'll be more conversation after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. And I just want to state, out of respect for her service to the Board of Supervisors for her 8 years, I had allowed her to go over her time. So any other comments from the public? All right. Any on Zoom? All right. I'll bring it back to the board. And I think it looks like we were just looking for direction. It looks like we have a consensus of that direction. And appreciate the presentation, appreciate the work, Matthew and Benjamin. Jeff, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.